You probably have a limiting belief that you don't realize you're defending. If there's a real goal or vision that you have for yourself, but it's very hard for you to buy into that vision, it's either not true, it's somebody else's vision that someone else had for themselves that you thought sounded good. And because you were afraid to pursue your own vision, because you thought your vision didn't sound cool enough, and now you want to pursue their vision, it doesn't resonate with you as much. And so it's hard for you to actually pursue it, even though you think it sounds good. It doesn't actually resonate with you. For example, we have an entrepreneurship craze. Everybody's speaking about entrepreneurship, at least in mainstream reading. And because of that, a lot of people who probably are not entrepreneurs feel compelled to try entrepreneurship, which is nice. I think we should try it. But even after realizing that they're not cut out for it, or that it's not cut out for them, because of the allure of entrepreneurship and the culture, they still keep trying to pursue it, even though it's not really who they are, because it sounds better than being an employee. Being an employee doesn't seem to be celebrated very much, right? It's almost like being a failure. It's like being a slacker. If you say you're an employee, it's almost like you're a person who doesn't believe in their own vision, or a person who doesn't have a vision, a person who doesn't have a goal, a person who's an underachiever. And so you feel like as long as you're an employee, your existence is underwhelming. But that's a limited belief, because there would be no entrepreneurs, or no bosses rather. You could be an entrepreneur, you can be a one person solopreneur, and you could be a one person business for sure, and be very successful according to standard measures. Meaning you can be a multi-millionaire and you're the only person in the organization. That's very possible. You probably won't be someone that people consider a boss because you don't have favor. If you're not one or the other, some people feel like they're failing, which is not true. Because in order to be a boss, you have to have employees. And just about everything that we see that's been created in the society that we believe to be great and useful was created by someone who started an organization, or a group of people who started an organization, and they had employees. So being an employee is not a worthless endeavor. It's not a thankless job. It's actually very useful, very much appreciated. Although I can understand that sometimes it doesn't always feel that way. And definitely at the moment and within the past 10 years. So it's not just today. Everything's been pretty much entrepreneurship. And to some extent, rightfully so, because the opportunities that were once presented to the average employee at an organization are no longer being presented to that employee, like pension, like a raise that keeps up with the pace of inflation. At least, ideally, you would want it to beat inflation so that it actually feels like a raise, and not just a way of, not just keeping up with the current value of your current lifestyle, or the current cost of the current lifestyle. You want to eventually live a better lifestyle. That's why you want to get a raise. You want your lifestyle to improve over time. That's why you want a raise. You don't want to maintain the lifestyle, even though the dollar amount is on that. But the actual spending power is not. It's not improved. I can understand why there is this real push for entrepreneurship, because to some extent, entrepreneurship is perceived as modern survival, because a lot of organizations are not offering a 401k package anymore, and they're not offering a pension plan. All you get is a check that doesn't even keep up with inflation. So where's the real value in it? So it's almost as if, realistically, if you take a step back and look at the current landscape of what it means to be a professional, it almost doesn't seem to make any sense to be an employee. To be an employee, granted, a boss or a leader at an organization can rationalize the figures for their organization, but not necessarily rationalize the figure for the employee, at least not in the way in which we traditionally thought about employers. It's a new way to think about employers. And so now the investment responsibility is on the actual employee, on the actual individual. Now it's imperative to understand finance, right? It's not really an option. Before, you really had to. You just bank on the organization or your employer taking care of you. So 30, 40 years when you retire from the employer, you would have a pension. That's not facing, which is also part of the reason why we're hearing so much more about investing in side hustles and side businesses and et cetera, and that, because there's no one looking out for the employee, quote unquote. So now really your employer, from the perspective of the employee, is your investor. They're investing in your dream. They're investing in your vision. They're investing in your goal. They're investing in your future, but only the one that you have for yourself.
Today, I want to talk about something that I was pondering on last night, and that was scarcity mindset. First of all, what's the difference between scarcity and something rooted in lack?
Nothing. Scarcity is lack. There is no difference. It's essentially saying, well, scarcity itself has no context. Something being rooted in scarcity gives it more context, meaning something is rooted in lack. Scarcity itself just means lack. So in essence, the foundation of something is lack. And because the foundation is lacking, there's not very much that you can build upon it, whatever that thing that you're trying to build may be.
Because here's a bit of my thought process. Because when you start off with something, you tend to lack knowledge and resources.
Yes.
Over the years, I've gained both,
Yes.
but still in my mind, it's like I'm lacking.
Yes.
So even though I've accumulated knowledge and resources, why am I still thinking in that, even though I have the things that should propel me forward?
Understanding that there's more to do doesn't mean that you're thinking in lack. In fact, it could be that you're thinking in abundance, right? Meaning that you understand that the journey of growth is endless. So there's always something more to do. There's always something more to learn. There's always something more to understand. So in essence, that's really abundance. That's not lack. Right? It's just you want to be careful not to feel like you're lacking. You have what you're supposed to have now. Is there more to learn? Yes. You'll get that in due time. When it's time for you to have it, you'll have it. So in this moment, you're not lacking, even though your understanding is not complete. That doesn't mean the same thing as being rooted in lack. Being rooted in lack is pretty much being in survival mode, feeling like there's not enough for you. And that's what informs your decisions, as opposed to understanding that there's more than enough for you. It's waiting for you. Not out there, but internally. It's waiting for you to realize who you are, what you are, and why you are, so that you can begin to manifest the things that you want to have in your life after you align yourself with the natural law of things on the universe. So once you've done that, then you can begin to move in a direction toward learning more about the things that you don't currently know.
He said if you were thinking you survive from what you're thinking, there's not enough of you. What does that mean?
Reason why a person thinks in survival mode is because their thinking is rooted in lack. Lack is a lack of resources. So there's not enough resources. You perceive the world in a way where you think someone else's wins, your loss. You could also perceive it as you lose things, lose opportunities that will not turn metaphorically as time progresses. So what I mean when I say you lose opportunities metaphorically, it's, let's say, for example, you want to be a model and you feel like there's a certain window for you to be a model. Perhaps you can think about what it means for you to be a model. What is it that you're trying to attain by being a model? Because there are other ways for you to attain that. You don't have to be a model to attain that thing that you think you need to be a model in order to attain. So if you can understand what it is that you can pull from modeling, potentially, then you can now see the other ways for you to acquire that very same thing without actually being a model in a way that's probably less tedious and has less of a time constraint. But you're probably not going to think that way if your thought process is rooted in life. You're going to think, chances are, that you need to be a model and a model only, and you need to do it within a certain time frame. And if you don't do that within a certain time frame, then you're never going to have the opportunity to get what you were trying to get from modeling, which is probably significance or a form of expression, although you may not be very clear on what you're trying to express exactly. So that's an example of someone who has the option of thinking in abundance, but because their thought process is rooted in lack, meaning they're thinking from the perspective of scarcity, they don't see the opportunity that's available to them. And so they have a harder time creating the reality that they say they want because they think that is tied strictly to being a model, when chances are it isn't. You reverse engineer it, and you are honest with yourself about what level you're at and what you need to do to move forward without doubting your ability to do it. So essentially, you have a goal in mind. You reverse engineer the steps that's required to actually achieve that goal. What are the milestones in between where you are now and where you want to be? And the steps in between each one of those milestones. You reverse engineer that to the best of your ability, and you start where you are. Don't lie about where you are, but also don't feel defeated by where you are, because you can see the vision. Now you just have to work toward it with the resources that you had, and understanding that you utilize the resources that you had to the best of your ability to acquire more resources. So you may not have all the resources that you need right now. In a lot of instances, when a lot of people start, they don't really think they have all the resources that they need. Sometimes they're correct. Sometimes they're not correct. Sometimes they start and they realize, hey, I do have everything that I need. I was very busy looking up instead of looking around, looking to my side, looking to my left, looking to my right, and seeing the people that can help me that I already know. Seeing how we can pull our resources together to create whatever it is that I'm interested in creating. And also, perhaps they're interested in helping me to create it in a way that I didn't even anticipate, because I never voiced this interest. So I never knew of their interests. Right? I never really created an environment for us to have these types of conversations. And so now that you have, and you've opened up about what it is that you want to do, they open up about what it is that they want to do. And now you can move towards your goal with all the resources that you need, but you didn't know you had those resources at your disposal until you voiced what you wanted to do. So in some instances, you have everything you need, but in a lot of instances, you don't. The objective is not to feel defeated by not having those resources yet, but use the resources that you currently have to build additional or have access to additional resources all the time so that you can achieve the goal eventually.
You say you see the vision. Like you don't have the resource, but you see the vision. What do you mean by that?
I mean, you see the goal, you see what it is that you want to accomplish. And if you have that, you can reverse engineer the steps that's required to get to that place to the best of your ability. Maybe you don't understand all those steps. Chances are you don't, because you haven't done it. Timing is important as well, because you can see the goal, but depending on when you decide to pursue it, circumstances change, and you have to pivot with it along the way to attain the goal eventually. There were people who started a business in 2019. It was going really well. 2020, COVID hit. A lot of companies went out of business, but there were quite a few companies that pivoted. They didn't see COVID coming. Many people didn't see COVID coming. They had to figure out a way. So the reverse engineering that those people may have done before they started their business in 2019 needed to be reconsidered because the circumstances were different now. So they had to pivot. In pivoting, they found a new way. They adjusted to the time, found a new way, and kept pursuing the goal. And many of them, by now especially, have actually achieved it. And they created new goals, and now they're pursuing those. Don't perceive a lack of resources as a lack of opportunity and a reason for you not to pursue the goal. Allow it to encourage you to become more resourceful, meaning using the resources that you had to the best of your ability in ways that you probably would not have thought to use the resources had you had the additional resources that you believe you need. Because oftentimes, again, we have a lot of resources at our disposal. One, we probably don't know about them. And two, we're probably not using them to the best of our ability because we don't have to. We're not forced to be creative in our approach to these resources because we have an abundance of resources. But when you don't have so many resources, you're forced to become more creative in how you utilize the resources that you currently have. And that way you get more out of it. You get more out of those resources. You get more out of yourself. And the it that I'm talking about is the experience of pursuing the goal at that stage in your pursuit with these once perceived limited resources. So with every step you take, you gain more resources, you gain more understanding, you gain more wisdom, and thus you strengthen your chances of actually achieving the goal.
So what happens if you have a goal? Not even a goal like that, but like a vision. If for some reason you don't see yourself acquiring it. Like you just can't fathom the idea that it's going to be yours. Not fathom is not the right word.
That is the right word. You probably have a limiting belief that you don't realize you're defending. If there's a real goal or vision that you have for yourself, but it's very hard for you to buy into that vision, it's either not true, it's somebody else's vision that someone else had for themselves that you thought sounded good. And because you were afraid to pursue your own vision, because you thought your vision didn't sound cool enough, and now you want to pursue their vision, it doesn't resonate with you as much. And so it's hard for you to actually pursue it, even though you think it sounds good. It doesn't actually resonate with you. For example, we have an entrepreneurship craze. Everybody's speaking about entrepreneurship, at least in mainstream media. And because of that, a lot of people who probably are not entrepreneurs feel compelled to try entrepreneurship, which is nice. I think you should try it. But even after realizing that they're not cut out for it, or that it's not cut out for them, because of the allure of entrepreneurship in the culture, they still keep trying to pursue it, even though it's not really who they are, because it sounds better than being an employee. Being an employee doesn't seem to be celebrated very much. Right? It's almost like being a failure. It's like being a slacker. If you say you're an employee, it's almost like you're a person who doesn't believe in their own vision, or a person who doesn't have a vision, a person who doesn't have a goal, a person who's an underachiever. And so you feel like as long as you're an employee, your existence is underwhelming. But that's a limiting belief, because there would be no entrepreneurs, or no bosses rather. You could be an entrepreneur, you can be a one-person solopreneur, and you could be a one-person business for sure, and be very successful according to standard metrics. Like, man, you can be a multi-millionaire, you're the only person in the organization. That's very possible. You probably won't be someone that people consider a boss because you don't have payroll. It's just you. If you're not one or the other, some people feel like they're failing, which is not true, because in order to be a boss, you have to have employees. And just about everything that we see that's been created in society that we believe to be great and useful was created by someone who started an organization, or a group of people who started an organization, and they had employees. So being an employee is not a worthless endeavor. It's not a thankless job. It's actually very useful, very much appreciated. Although I can understand that sometimes it doesn't always feel that way. And definitely at the moment, and within the past 10 years, or not just today, everything has been pretty much about entrepreneurship. And to some extent, rightfully so, because the opportunities that were once presented to the average employee at an organization are no longer being presented to that employee, like pension, like a raise that keeps up with the pace of inflation, at least. Ideally, you would want it to beat inflation so that it actually feels like a raise, and not just a way of, not just keeping up with the current value of your current lifestyle, or the current cost of your current lifestyle. You want to eventually live a better lifestyle. That's why you want to get a raise. You want your lifestyle to improve over time. That's why you want to raise. You don't want to maintain a lifestyle, even though the dollar amount is going up, but the actual spending power is not, it's not improving. I can understand why there is this real push for entrepreneurship, because to some extent, entrepreneurship is perceived as modern survival. Because a lot of organizations are not offering a 401k package anymore, and they're not offering a pension plan. All you get is a check that doesn't even keep up with inflation. So where's the real value in that? So it's almost as if, realistically, if you take a step back and look at the current landscape of what it means to be a professional, it almost doesn't seem to make any sense to be an employee. To be employee, granted, a boss or a leader at an organization can rationalize the figures for their organization, but not necessarily rationalize the figure for the employee, at least not in the way in which we traditionally thought about employers. It's a new way to think about employer. And so now the investment responsibility is on the actual employee, on the actual individual. Now it's imperative to understand finance, right? It's not really an option anymore. Before you really had to, you can just bank on the organization or your employer taking care of you. So 30, 40 years when you retire from your employer, you would have a pension. That's not the case anymore, which is also part of the reason why we're hearing so much more about investing in side hustles and side businesses and et cetera now, because there's no one looking out for the employee, quote unquote. So now really your employer, from the perspective of the employee, is your investor. They're investing in your dream. They're investing in your vision. They're investing in your goal. They're investing in your future, but only the one that you have for yourself. The idea that you have for yourself in regard to the amount of money that you want to have in 30, 20, 40 years is what you're going to use that money that you make from your employer to invest in, which means that you're going to make sacrifices today, which feel like even bigger sacrifices today due to inflation, due to the value of the currency being cheapened or lessened. So that means you have to invest that much more of the money that you actually don't have. So you have to invest more of less money, meaning you have to offer more from less in order to get the same outcome that you would have gotten, let's say, 2 years prior. I get why people don't want to be employees. I get why they feel the way that they feel. And thus I understand why the entrepreneurs are screaming be an entrepreneur. However, that being said, there is some value to being an employee, even if you had aspirations to become an entrepreneur, because you can treat your job like school in that case, where you can learn on somebody else's dollar. They put up the money to start this organization. They use the money from this organization to keep the organization running. You don't. You don't have to think at an organizational level. And even when you do, the burden is not really on you. The burden is on the founder. The burden is on the CEO to keep the organization up and running. So you can use the environment as an educational, almost academic practice for you to learn as much as you can, because as long as you're an employee, to some extent, you're operating with a certain level of security, even if you're employed at will.
Employed at will?
Yeah, meaning that the employee can fire you whenever they decide to. They already need the real reason.
So entrepreneurship is what?
Investing in yourself is the way. I think it's a great intro to why someone should be interested in investing in themselves. It's a great intro to self-development, financial education, financial literacy. But that's so broad. Like, we should try to understand as much as we possibly can about finances and try to use that understanding of finances to understand economics, which is finances and politics together. And then you can make some sound decision with finance, politics, psychology, and accounting. You have to understand accounting really to understand finance. Accounting is the language of business, right? So accounting is everything that happened in the past. Finance is projecting into the future. Politics, psychology, of course, is important. Basic arithmetic, basic math. And you can be pretty successful if you have that understanding.
Can we go back to the scarcity mindset? Is there a remedy? In other ways, how can you shift your mind in order to not only understand abundance, but actually stand in abundance?
You have to embody it. That was a whole conversation we had before about embodying those steps and the steps you take. It's the same thing.
Let's say you reach abundance mindset.
You don't embody anything without an abundance mindset. You cannot embody success without an abundance mindset. So you have to first shift your thought process. You have to first shift your identity in order to adopt an abundance mindset. Truly.
So just to reiterate, shifting your identity means shifting how you operate, or does that mean shifting how you see yourself?
Shifting how you see yourself, how you operate, or your habits. It's not your identity. Your identity is what you use as leverage to support your habits. So your habits are consistent with your identity.
And your identity is consistent with
how you see yourself.
But what if you see yourself being rooted in that?
That's probably true. That's probably why you see yourself that way. Now, if you want to shift that, you have to go through the process of shifting
which entails.
all of the steps that were included in embodying. It's the same question, just different wording.
Seems like these like little things they all come together and like in the same place. Right.
To some extent.
Yes. Ultimately, yes. The nuancing of different things that you encounter that you need to understand in order to get back to that root that everything else comes from. Because if you have an identity that's rooted in lack, you're probably not going to embody the person that you need to embody, or being the person that you're not going to embody the characteristics, the personality, the habits of someone who is successful, because you probably don't see yourself as being successful because your ideas are rooted in lack. Success and lack are opposites in this context. Yes, you can be successful at living a life of lack, but the idea is you want to be successful at having abundance in your life. Abundance and lack on the opposite sides of the spectrum. And as Tony Rothers says, you don't ever get beyond scarcity. You have to start beyond it. You have to start with abundance. It's not, I'm going to go through the different stages of scarcity. It's, this is scarcity. I don't want to be here anymore. So how do I adopt the practices that align me with abundance? There's two ways that I understand that you can back your way into, or you can start to live an abundant life, right? Something can happen in your life, a situation that breaks your rhythm, that provides a window for you to change how you act, but it's inspired by an external circumstance. You got hit by a car, you can't walk anymore. Now you got to think of different ways. It shifts your mentality instantly, right? So the change happens instantly. Now you can choose to think from abundance. You can choose to say, okay, is this the beginning or is it the end? Did this happen to me or did it happen for me? You can make that decision. Something great can happen in your life. It's not always a negative thing. Something great can happen in your life. For some people who are rooted in trauma, rooted in lack, if something traumatizing happens to them, sometimes it shakes them and it says, okay, it shakes them out of their way of thinking. Sometimes it just validates their way of thinking. Someone has low self-esteem and something negative happens, they just use it to validate the reason why they have low self-esteem. Or they can use it to say, this concept of low self-esteem doesn't make sense. Under what circumstances does a person who sees everything as negative think instantly that this is no longer true? Probably because something positive happened that they didn't expect to happen, and it breaks their rhythm. Or you can decide to break your own rhythm. That's when you adopt habits. It's not an external circumstance that influences you to change your rhythm. It's you saying, I want to do something differently. So you decide you want to start adopting the habits of someone who has the goal, someone who has achieved what you want to achieve in your life. You don't believe it yet, though. You don't believe you're that person yet. Of course you don't, because you're not that person. And perhaps you're someone that can't just say, I want to change and just change. Some people, something happens, they decide they're going to change because of that external stimuli, and they believe it instantly. They believe that shift. Their identity shifts instantly. It was inspired by the external stimuli. But because of that external stimuli and the type of person that they are, they can shift their mind instantly and say, never again. This is never happening here. Some people cannot do that. For some people, they have a traumatic experience. They can't shift their mind instantly because there's nothing to support this never happening again in their heads. Their environment, that they don't see it. They need to see it. They can't just say, I'm rich, I'm wealthy, believe it, and then manifest it. To them, that doesn't make any sense. They're saying they're rich and they're wealthy, but they're homeless. When they look around, they're like, I'm homeless, but I'm telling myself I'm rich and I'm wealthy. That's inconsistent with what I'm seeing. And they use what they're seeing to justify their identity. So they have to see something different. And in order for them to see something different, they have to do something different, right? So they have to adopt the habits of someone else who has done what they say they want to do. And they can't negotiate with themselves in the process. They have to say, I'm doing this and do that. See their lives start to shift because they're doing that. And the more they start to see their lives shifting because they're doing this thing without negotiation, the more they start to believe they're getting closer to actually achieving the goal. The more they believe that they're getting closer to actually achieving the goal because they see their circumstances changing in their lives, the more they believe in the identity, having the identity of the person who achieved that goal. But they have to see it first. They have to see it in the physical. Some people don't have to see it in the physical. They immediately make a shift in their mind and they can start moving in that direction immediately. For them, it may be a bit of a different experience because their identity shifted immediately. So they don't have to go through the process of, the process of having to adopt habits that support that are different for them because they are actually adopting a habit that's consistent with their identity. Whereas the person who has to see it is adopting a habit that's not consistent with their identity yet. So it's a different journey. It's a different experience.
So for the second person, how can they keep adamant about keeping those habits in order to shift their identity?
Don't negotiate with yourself.